What is up, everyone, and welcome to Drop In, where we have open, authentic conversations about all things mental health, including AI for your mental health. Dr. Jackie back with us. What's happening?
Hello.
AI for your mental health. How about some stats to start off this episode?
Love it. Give it to me.
ChatGPT, month of June 2025. 122 million daily users.
Wow.
Another one for you. In March alone on TikTok, 16.7 million TikTok posts discussing using ChatGPT for mental health specifically.
Interesting. I'm actually surprised by that. I'm surprised that many people are using it for mental health specifically.
And those are just the people who posted about it.
Right.
So you got to think that number is super high. Oh, this has been all the rage lately. I've seen Time articles. I've seen it in People. I've seen lots of discussion about using AI for your mental health. We're two psychologists. Have you ever used AI for your mental health?
Yes.
Do tell.
So essentially, I look at it as a tool. And I think it's also important to differentiate the difference between AI and ChatGPT. So we're already using AI for mental health. We have been.
What?
Yeah.
How?
All of the apps that we recommend, like Calm or Headspace or any of those meditation apps, anything for mood tracking, those types of things, that's AI. Those are apps for mental health that we're already recommending and using with clients. And I don't think we think of it as AI, but those are very much AI powered tools that we're using in conjunction with therapy. So I think there's a huge difference between specifically ChatGPT and asking ChatGPT for therapy advice or mental health advice and using AI for mental health, because I think there is a much more umbrella term when it comes to AI.
See, that's so interesting because I wouldn't have categorized it that way. Meaning, when I think of AI, I think of some intelligence that's pulling data that you basically can ask it something and it responds. When I think of Headspace, I think these are pre-recorded meditations done by a human, but I don't think of it the same way as an app versus AI. I agree that they're both like technology that we use to better, but I think, and maybe I'm wrong in this, but I think when a lot of people think of AI, they're thinking of something I interact with or interface with, that there's sort of this nuance and exchange where I don't think Headspace and Calm, and again, maybe I'm wrong, maybe they updated, really have that dimension.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think there are definitely apps that are much more integrative in terms of even like scheduling and calendar type apps, things like that for like ADHD specifically. And those are some of the things that I've tested out for myself. And those ones are more interactive. Like it'll ask you what tasks you have to complete. It'll start to break those things down for you into smaller bite-sized tasks. So that way you can have one thing that you do first and then it'll prioritize the order for you. Or you put in a bunch of tasks that you need to complete that day and how long each thing typically takes, and it will prioritize them for you or put them in the right order so that it fits into your schedule when you have meetings, etc. So those are things that are a bit more integrative, but I totally hear what you're saying too, because I think there is a big difference between having a conversation with AI or ChatGPT about your mental health and interacting with what feels like a person or doing therapeutic work versus an app that feels like it's more programmed.
Exactly. Which is like, I'm just admitting as an elder millennial, this is just new territory for me. Like, I am not familiar. In preparing for this episode, I feel like I did my own deep dive research. Before preparing for this episode, I'd probably used ChatGPT, for example, maybe 20 times ever in my life. And I felt like I'd been using it like Google.
Yeah.
Like I've been asking it questions, and I would ask it to like, give me like 10 research articles on this. And then of course you got on the back end, are these legit? And for the most part, I've found it really helpful. I haven't found it to be in the capacity I've used it for like research information to be more inaccurate than Google. And
Agreed.
I feel like that's what a lot of us have been using Google to gather information, help summarize, sort of do all these things. But the ways my clients use it, I feel like they're integrating it more into the day-to-day life. Like, help me write this email more professionally. Here's what I want to say. How could you say this in a professional sense, for example?
Right. Agreed. And I think in a lot of ways, there is a certain level of inevitability when it comes to AI and ChatGPT specifically, that these things are very much going to be the future for us. We're going to be integrating them more and more. And that is something that people, younger generations, are already using in their day-to-day life. I think we're probably on the older end, which is funny
Ancient
because
end.
I feel old when we talk about this. But I agree. I think there are a lot of like clients that I've talked to and people that I've talked to that are very much using it for those exact reasons in their day-to-day life. And they're more familiar with it then. So they know how to ask it the right questions and give it the right prompts. Whereas for us, we're like, how do I find these research articles? Or what's the latest research on this topic? And give me evidence-based tools for these types of things, because we are using it like Google, as opposed to people that are super familiar with it and much more comfortable with it, I think are using it more as like a buddy system of getting things done and being able to do those tasks day to day.
And this is where I feel like we just got to share our bias. On this podcast, we share and are authentic. And I feel like that's what makes us human. There's a part of me, especially in like I work, with a good amount of high schoolers and college kids. There's a part of me that's had a tough transition with stuff like writing essays.
Yeah.
I know it's my own curmudgeon, like get with the times, like this is absolutely what's next. But there's a part of me that's like, you're asking AI to write the entire thing for you. And then you're trying to go through and just like shift it enough that it doesn't get flagged.
Yeah.
And there's part of me that's like in the for it. And again, we'll get more into the mental health in a minute, but I'm just sharing my bias has been like, I worry about the learning. Are people going to know anything anymore? But I guess, again, Google's been around. So you could argue like, what do people know? Are we just products of search engines? So again, arguing against myself in that capacity.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think we sound like boomers sometimes when we say these things.
Yeah, we do.
But I think about even when we were writing like our dissertations and stuff, and it's like we used all of like the articles on the databases that we found, right? But the prior generation before us had to go to the library
The catalog?
and like literally pull articles from journals and like photocopy them. So they probably thought the same exact thing about us.
Right.
Like, you guys are cheating your way through.
100%.
And it's funny because we are now gross, but like now we are that older generation looking at the younger generation being like, well, does that count? Are they cheating? Is that, the next generation's style of technology? But I actually think it's really cool in a lot of ways because there's so much more access to information that we didn't have at our fingertips in the same way, right? Like, again, prior generations had to literally go to the library to learn about certain topics. Whereas for us, we could Google those things. And now this generation can just ask their phone and get 78 different articles that pop up and are summarized for them.
And I've definitely heard things with this of that it can be inaccurate. So you got to kind of check on the back end. Again, I haven't had that experience yet. But I'm sure that's true, like with anything else. Like it could pull from something that was like another thing that was like misinformation or inaccurate.
Right.
Like I believe that is certainly possible. But I know it's just like, it's adapting with the change in the technology. And there's part of me to expand so much. We're coming back to mental health. Hang on a minute. But there's part of me that's like, I guess this is just inevitable in a way of like, we will just be interfacing all the time with AI. And it's just going to be less imperative of sort of what we know.
Yeah.
And there's something about that that feels different. Meaning, like when someone was like, my dissertation on mindfulness-based stress reduction, the amount of articles I read, and I'll be 100%, a lot of half-read articles. I'm not going to be up here. I read it cover to cover.
Skimmed through.
Skipping the methods. I didn't need to know that part of whatever. But I'm being real. I read a lot of articles, you know, and felt like, wow, I've developed a large expertise in the literature that surrounds mindfulness-based stress reduction. Fast forward to today, I don't need to know that.
Right.
So AI knows that better than I will. In the moment it hits the, you know, web as a published article, it knows it better than me. So it's just sort of like, I think it's like asking like, what's your role as an expert? And part of me is like, the inevitable is we are learning to interface better with AI.
Yes.
And again, I get way too philosophical of like, what are us humans supposed to do to have meaning on the daily? But we don't have to get that existential.
Right. And if I'm being real, my take is that truly AI is the future. There is an element and a component where it's inevitable, and it's really positive to stay up with the times in terms of that and use that to our advantage, especially in terms of access and resources and making systems work better for people. And I don't think there will ever be anything that can truly replace human interaction.
That's already the take, huh? That's the one you're going to hold.
That is the hill I'm willing to die on.
Well, to match what you're saying there's an article, and this was all over social media, and I did dive into it and pull it up. But researchers looked at 830 participants that were either assigned to a trained human therapist or chat GPT, and then asked them to rate the counseling experience based on empathy, cultural sensitivity, helpfulness, emotional connection, etc. Any predictions?
I'm scared.
Scared? What are you proclaiming right now that you're anti-AI? AI, note this. Note this right now, Dr. Jackie, not on your side.
Don't come for me.
So AI consistently scored higher. And here is to your point, particularly when participants believed its advice came from a human. That is the take-home point.
Yes.
And I'm not going to say it's always going to be this way. But in right now, I think the reflection, especially in the mental health field, is it feels different when you're talking to a human rather than AI.
Right.
Does it mean AI is not helpful? That's what we're about to broach.
Yeah. And I'm not surprised by that, because I think there is something that's super helpful when it comes to AI for mental health, especially when it comes to skill development and skill building and having resources and access to those resources, especially when it comes to, you know, anxiety or panic attacks or behavior activation, those types of skills that not everyone knows or has access to. But I don't think that there is ever a way to fully replace that need and desire for humans to have social connections.
I agree. And again, we're both psychologists, primarily work as therapists. There's just no way we're not going to say we're biased. But that's the point I wonder of, like, are there just going to be things that you want to interface with a human about? Because I can sort of agree that Chat GPT or like Open AI is going to be more knowledgeable. But what are the things you want to interface or connect with a human about?
Right. And I think even in terms of the challenges that I'm seeing in clients, a lot of them are talking about this feeling of isolation, this feeling of loneliness, and not having those deep connections with people. And part of that is you get to have those truly deep conversations with your therapist. You connect in those ways, and you know that you're talking to an actual human and not something or someone that is programmed to respond in a certain way. Because I think the assumption, at least my assumption, would be if I'm talking to AI, I'm talking to a chat bot, right? It is programmed to be, quote, empathetic towards me. So it's essentially going to tell me what I want to hear or reflect back the feelings that I'm telling it that I'm feeling. But do I think that every other human would actually respond that way? I don't.
It's so interesting because some people would say, well, yeah, that's what therapists do. You're paid to do that. Now, us being therapists and being in the field, I'm like, I don't think so. I think
Right.
you're going to catch a lot of that therapist personality.
Yes.
And I agree overall, like there's a certain amount of unconditional positive regard, which we're about to get into, in those sort of core conditions that Carl Rogers spoke about that I think a lot of us emulate. But I also think there's the improv personality and authenticity of that human that I don't know. Like if you gave this, if the same person gave the same prompt to Chat GPT, which I don't know the answer to this, would you get sort of this cookie cutter response?
Right. And I think that's the downside of AI and ChatGPT, especially, is that it knows the manualized version of all of these types of therapies. And because it knows the manualized version, it doesn't necessarily have the nuance that we would have in a therapy relationship. It didn't do a full intake with you. It doesn't know your entire history for the most part, unless you give it every single detail of your history.
Right.
And again, because it is very manualized, you're getting more manualized responses, which in some regards actually perpetuates certain biases. So there's like a cultural component also that ChatGPT and AI technology does not actually account for can't account for.
Yeah, that's a really great point. A really great point. The study's got to be coming, right? And again, this was one study that I pulled that was relatively recent, but like, yeah, the cultural components and how helpful people feel. But in that study, it also didn't surprise me that, again, one of the big factors, mediator or moderating factors, statistic.
You're the stats guy.
Dang it. I'm losing my PhD. It's either a mediator or a moderator that they had to sort of think that this was a human to rate the AI higher in that experiment. Oh, gosh, put on blast. I hope none of my old professors reach out. Okay, experiment time. We're going for it. I told you I was going to chat with Chat GPT about like sort of like mimic therapy in a lot of ways, because this is what people are doing.
Yeah.
This is what they're posting to TikTok. And I had heard through the grapevine, you can ask Chat GPT to be any historic therapist that you want. I picked Carl Rogers.
How did it go?
Listen, I'm going to go through the script because I think it's important.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you exactly what I said. I'm going to tell you exactly what it said. So wake the family up, have them tune in and buckle up because we're about to see ChatGPT. I'll say for me, in the responses and prompts I gave it, I was thinking of a time where I had felt this way. So just note that I wasn't currently feeling this way for what that's worth, but I was like thinking back a few years and what would I even talk to it about? So this is what I said. I go, hey, chat. Is that very Gen Z of me or what? Hey, chat, I'm wondering if you can chat with me like you were the great therapist, Carl Rogers, as I ask you some questions. Chat GPT. Absolutely, I'd be honored to step into that role as Carl Rogers. I will aim to embody his core principles. Here we go. Unconditional positive regard, empathetic understanding, and genuineness. I won't judge you. I'll try to deeply understand your experience from your perspective and reflect it back so you can explore it more clearly. Go ahead. What would you like to talk about?
All right.
Off to a start here.
Yeah.
Feeling pretty good about it.
So far, so good.
Textbook in a way. I go, well, I've been feeling overly stressed lately and feeling like the weight of the world is on my shoulders. I often spread myself too thin and leave little time for self-care. Chat GPT. It sounds like you're carrying a lot right now, like there's an immense amount of pressure and maybe even a sense that you're supposed to hold everything together for others, even when it's at the expense of your own well-being. I wonder what it's like for you to say that out loud, that you're spreading yourself too thin and not leaving space for your own care. What are you feeling to sit with that truth? I mean,
It's pretty spot on.
That's pretty spot on.
Yeah.
That's what someone who's Rogerian, humanistic. Okay.
Yeah.
When I read that and it spit that back out at me in like 5 seconds, I was like, oh, all right. I'm like, and I reflected. You know, I leaned back on our big sectional couch out there. I was like, hey, we're on a ride right now. And I was like, you know what? It feels exhausting. Like, when will I be able to have time for myself? When will things feel stable enough that I don't have to work all the time? Chat GPT. That exhaustion, it sounds so deep. Like it's not just physical tiredness, but something emotional too, a weariness from constantly pushing, constantly giving, and rarely receiving the same kind of care in return. And there's a longing in what you said as well, a longing for rest, stability, for freedom, to breathe without feeling guilty. I hear you wondering, when will it be enough? And maybe beneath that, even asking, am I allowed to stop? To care for myself without the world falling apart? What comes up as I reflect that back?
Wow. Okay.
At this point, I'm kind of like, all right, you know.
It's pretty legit.
We go on. I say, it feels accurate. I'm trying to enjoy my time along the way, but sometimes I think I should just be working more to earn more money. But then when could I actually enjoy my life? How old would I have to be? How much money would I have to have? Chat GPT. That's such a powerful and honest question. When will I get to enjoy my life, and how much is enough before I give myself permission to rest, to be present and feel joy? It sounds like you're caught in this tension. On one side, this voice that says you should keep going, keep earning, keep striving. And on the other side, this quieter, aching voice that just wants to live now. Not later, not when everything's perfectly secure, but now. And I'm wondering, who taught you that you should earn your rest, your peace, your joy? Who set that standard of how much is enough? And how does it feel as you sit with this question?
Definitely Rogerian, that's for sure.
We're into the last stanza before I ran out of data. You can run out of data. This does happen, and it's $20 a month, which is relatively low for something that may be helpful. So this is how I reflected back. I think the busyness was modeled by my father and mother, actually. They were always working so hard when I was a child. And also there is just the reality of me having to pay my bills. Things are expensive. Mortgage is expensive. It just feels like things keep going up. And it makes it difficult some months to make ends meet. And I didn't predict that. So it makes me feel more and more inclined to keep working. Last response here from Chat GPT. That makes so much sense. You're not only living with internal pressures, but also very real external ones. Bills, mortgage, survival, those things aren't imagined stressors. And on top of that, the model you grew up with, your parents who were always working likely taught you in ways both spoken and unspoken that being busy, being productive is how you stay safe, how you prove your worth, maybe even how you love. It's as if the idea of rest has come after the work, if it comes at all. And so now, even when you're yearning for stillness, your body and mind may not know how to let you slow down. not with the patterns so deeply rooted, and not with the very real financial pressures hovering over you. And yet I can hear something very alive in your voice asking, what about my life? When do I get to live? That voice matters. That's you, not the programming or the stress, but the part of longing to be human, not just functional. Would it feel okay to ask, what does living mean to you when you imagine it? When you imagine it, what does rest, joy, and enoughness look like for you, even in a small way?
Wow. So what was your experience with that? How did you feel interacting with it?
I felt very impressed. I'm just being real. And maybe because I went in with sort of low to no expectation, it felt in a lot of ways like interactive journaling is the best way I could describe what I experienced. And that took course over maybe like 15 minutes. And I sat and thought about things and I reflected. And the responses back, I mean, it felt Rogerian. It feels humanistic. And so I found it helpful. And it, again, even knowing that it was AI, I felt as self-reflective as I would if I were journaling.
Which I think is an important distinction, right? Because it sounds like you got some good insights that you were looking for that maybe if you had really sat down and journaled and processed through a lot of things on your own, you could have also gotten to those insights eventually. But did you feel truly validated? Did you feel connected to anyone or anything? Was there any other context, or was it more on the insight side of things?
It's interesting because this is not a shock to you, but I have a heavy imagination. Heavy.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's related to personality, OCD, like a very active, hyperactive human that I am. But I was conceptualizing this like spirit of Carl Rogers. And I like literally was thinking about them in a server somewhere, like communicating this to me. That's what, like, I was in this zone. And again, this is a one experience for me. Like, and again, it was having me reflect, but I knew it wasn't him.
Yeah.
But I found it helpful. And I can't say, and I've had 5 different therapists in my life. I've had a lot of therapy. It's not to say that this rivaled it for me of the moments I've had in therapy. It did feel like a great journaling session. And for those of you who journal and use that as an outlet, research supported, we love it. I think some of us can relate to. Sometimes you journal and it's like, I don't know that I feel much different. But then sometimes you do and you're like, oh, I highlighted something in there or expressed something that was under the water that like I just needed to kind of like put my snorkel on and look at and like, oh yeah.
I think that's a really good way of describing it, because a lot of times when you're journaling, you're not necessarily self-directed in the ways that you want to be, or don't know what questions to ask yourself to get to the insights that you're looking for. So I think that's a really great potential option, especially even for people in between sessions, or if therapy isn't an option at the time. It sounds like that could be a really great potential option to get to those insights that you are looking for when you already know this is how I'm feeling and I'm open to questions about that.
I agree. I really agree. I think the issues that many therapists have brought up, and I saw this in, I believe, a Time article that was really viral just a few weeks ago of a psychiatrist having a conversation. I don't know if it was ChatGPT, but some AI where the wording they were using was kind of cryptic, if I'm being real, like the psychiatrist, but it was like, I want to be with my family. And the AI was like, great, you should be together. And you could obviously tell they were talking about suicidal ideation here.
Right.
And the responses they had gotten back from AI were like problematic of like, okay, a human would easily be able to decipher here that this is something that there's risk being discussed. And I didn't test it in that way. I've heard that if you express suicidality or whatever, they give you call lines and they sort of provide you with that information. I don't know that's true. I've just heard that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've heard really mixed things, if I'm being honest. So I saw something along those lines. I don't know if it was the same article or a different one, but I do think that there is a challenge in terms of AI not necessarily knowing what the ethical code is and how to use certain morals and human social context for certain aspects of harm, self-harm, harm to others, those types of things. And it doesn't know how to assess risk in the same way that we are trained to do. However, on the flip side of that, I will say that I have had clients who have used it in moments of suicidality and had them walked through how to get through that moment and think consequentially or divert attention to something else or a different activity in that moment, which helped that person ride through the intensity of that feeling in the moment. So I've heard both sides. Would I trust AI 100% in those moments? No. But is it something that might be a tool to help alongside therapy, especially for higher acuity symptoms? It could be.
And I think this is just the nuance of it all, right? That it's just, it's still a new frontier.
Right.
And I think in the way that more and more people interfacing it in the ways that, I just tested out here, I think there's enough people saying it was helpful for me that can't be dismissed.
Right.
It doesn't matter to the degree that you feel threatened within our role here. I'm going to be honest. I do. In some ways, I think if a therapist felt like they didn't, who wants to feel like the thing they spent years of their life studying or putting energy into might be replaced by AI? Like, if you're a human out there, I don't care what you do. If you don't say that makes you nervous, I don't really believe you.
Yeah.
And I'm just being authentic. Like, with me, there is a part of me that's like, I want to still show up and be helpful for people. But I think there's something undeniable about this. That was a free interaction I had.
Right.
And I did the next day, and I ran out of data again. I won't go through all the details, but I asked it to be Judith Beck, cognitive behavioral therapist. In that, I'll just say, I won't go through. Some of the things, they were definitely CBT for what it's worth. Love, hate, CBT gets the polar ends of things. But the things they highlighted as far as thoughts they wanted me to like evaluate and do the dig downward arrow technique, some of the choices it made, I was like, I don't understand why you would make that choice. Like, maybe I can quickly find, just for the reference, of like the first thing it really wanted me to focus on. I tried to use the exact same prompt I did with AI Carl Rogers, was this thought of, when will this end? I would like you to try to find evidence, or what evidence do you have that it won't end? And what evidence do you have that things can or have changed before? My feeling was there were 2 or 3 other thoughts I had laid out that I was like, this one feels kind of fruitless.
Yeah.
And I went through it with them and felt like, that was a road to nowhere. And it's not to say that doesn't sometimes happen in therapy.
Sure.
Like, of course it does. But it was just interesting. I'm like, I don't know any therapist who would have picked that thought to tackle.
Right.
It felt very like this is a robot picking the first thing I said.
Right. And I think that's the nuance that AI truly just can't replace in terms of human interactions, is recognizing what is the important piece here for that person, because there's so much more behind the things that we say a lot of times. And whether it's the body language, whether it's knowing that person and their background and the ways that they communicate certain things, there is something that we just kind of understand in human connection of that wasn't actually the most important thought to evaluate in that situation. Whereas AI doesn't know all of those different communication nuances.
Yeah, I agree. And again, I would like to collect more data and sort of see more, but that was my experience over in the CBT realm of like I felt like it was going in a direction that I'm like, again, I just don't know what therapist would have picked this pathway.
Right. And if I'm being honest, here's my take on things. I think AI can be super helpful when it comes to skill building, truly, because there are certain tools, there are certain skills that I think everyone can benefit from, even certain tools and skills that are specifically designed for anxiety or panic attacks or depression, any of those things, that it can be tailored to your symptoms, your diagnostics, all of the above. Where I don't see AI being super helpful or being able to truly replace our job, again, is in that human interaction. Because even if someone is interacting with AI and they're thinking that that person is their therapist, there's something about thinking that there's another person on the other end of this versus it being a robot. And there is this difference. The challenge a lot of times is also in terms of consent, because sometimes people don't realize that there isn't another person on the other end. For certain apps and chatbots and things like that, I think there's this assumption that there is a therapist on the other end, and sometimes there's not, which
Right.
is a little concerning, of course. But I just don't think that there is ever a robot or a chatbot or AI that can fully replace the same human interaction that we are able to have with other humans
Yet.
yet.
And I agree
Fair.
with what you're saying, and I'm like, that's today.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, you think of like, if one of the main plagues that you had mentioned that is washing over humanity right now is isolation. Business people are always trying to make money. What's next? Companion robot. It's just obvious. It's
Yeah.
obvious that that's what's next. It's also obvious that's what people are using Chat GPT for. You know, there's something about that as we lean more and more into technology is like, I don't know what helps turn the tide back to connecting with humans. And you could have good philosophical debates of should we not? What are the pros and cons? That's kind of what we're literally discussing today, because
Yeah.
these issues aren't black and white. But you did mention that you think for skill building it can be helpful. And I know you tested it out a little bit, or you asked it some questions too.
Yeah, I asked it more ADHD focused skills and questions. And I found it to be really helpful in that regard, because I had asked it, like, how can I get out of bed easier in the morning
With having ADHD.
with having
Okay.
ADHD? So I gave it the caveat that I have ADHD, I am this age, and I have a hard time getting out of bed in the morning. What are some of the top 5 tips that you can present me with? And it did give a lot of really helpful recommendations in terms of skills and breaking things down and giving evidence-based techniques, which I think are helpful. And again, I think that's where skills can be so helpful in the AI realm. And I think the future is going to incorporate that a lot more, even within systems. And this is how I foresee that happening. Even thinking about working in college counseling or a system like community mental health or the VA or something like that, there is a triage process that happens where they assess what your acuity is, what needs you have in that moment, if you need to be set up with medication management, if you need to be set up in a group or with individual, what the presenting concerns are. And you are triaged appropriately based on those things that you are presenting with, right? If there is an AI tool that will simplify that and triage people to the right places, and you can then allot more time to the actual clinicians to have sessions and have one-on-one interactions or run groups or things like that, that can actually be a really helpful tool in terms of allowing more space for client interactions that are needed. Even when I was working in one of my college counseling settings, what we did a lot of times was if people were put on a wait list, we would put them into a skills group so that they could learn some of the basic core skills to improve mental health across the board while they were on this wait list and while they were waiting for one-on-one therapy. And so I think those are certain things that everyone can benefit from, especially if you're on a wait list, especially if you don't have access to mental health services or therapy or the financial backing for that as well. So I think there is a lot that can be improved in terms of access.
Right. Yeah, from the accessibility lens, like how could you not be a fan? And I'm with you, like in this exact moment in time, like if one of my clients was in crisis, I would still recommend a call center.
Agreed.
And it's because I just think those paths are more paved, that I know there's humans and there's backup humans and there's people where it's like for that particular thing of like feeling unsafe or feeling in crisis, I can't in this moment recommend, Chat GPT. But like, again, the route that I went down and the things I expressed, I did find it helpful. It would have been interesting if I would have kept going, like
Yeah.
kind of where that would all lead. It's just like, I can't minimize it. And there's something about people having access to things that are helpful, that will help your mental health, whether it's skill or reflective in nature. Why would you not be a fan of that?
Right. And I think also it's super beneficial in the way of certain populations that are not either able to or on board with seeking mental health services because of stigma or cultural factors. Those people can probably benefit from ChatGPT or AI mental health interventions because it's better than nothing.
Yeah, I through that lens, I agree. And I think the thing that I'm waiting to see is somebody's conducting this research is to look across cultures, look across diversity factors to see, what are the differences? Because I'm with you. There's part of me that's like somebody, with OpenAI, this is reaching somewhere. Do we know that it's reaching across, diverse spectrums that it could sort of, represent? But there is that part of like, especially I didn't give ChatGPT any of my background. I could have.
Right.
Would that have changed things? Would saying I'm a 40-year-old white straight male, originally from the Midwest, now living in Southeast Florida, like giving it all the details, would it have shifted things? Would it, I don't know. But those are all the things that I feel like, again, OpenAI is only going to grow, and people aren't going to not use something that is both accessible, free, and that they find helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. And I agree with that. And I think it would be helpful for a lot of people to utilize that. Again, especially in these either areas that don't have access or they don't have the means for therapy or group therapy or mental health services. Why wouldn't that be something that is incorporated? Of course, I want to see the research. I want to see the evidence for that. And I want to make sure that those tools that they're using are also following similar ethical codes that we do so that there is a safeguard in place, especially when it comes to risk and cultural factors and all of those pieces that we take into account every day when we're seeing our clients. But I absolutely agree in terms of the accessibility is huge, and especially for people who don't have access or for very stigmatized types of mental health challenges, right? People who are really embarrassed by the things that they're experiencing, or, whether it's sexual dysfunction or certain topics that they just don't feel comfortable speaking about with another person. There's a certain anonymous feeling that goes along with that, that feels less stigmatizing, and it feels like I can just get information and get tools and get some of the help that I might need.
And that's where it's, again, the parallels of like journaling come up, because we often feel that way. Like when I get asked that when I'm doing like lives on, social media and stuff, of like, what if I don't feel comfortable expressing this to someone? I'm often like, yeah, journaling, research back, safe place, the amount of reflection you can get, through that. But yeah, I'm with you that you're getting a bit extra and a bit more interpretation and again, a bit more. That's why I kind of categorized it interactive journaling. It's interesting, and I was surprised by the level of what I got from it.
Yeah. And I think you also have to learn how to interact with it and what prompts to use that make it the most helpful for you specifically. And again, for myself, I've used it in the context of ADHD and time management and those types of skills and how to organize my day and prioritize certain tasks, which has been helpful for me because it does all of the thinking and takes that away from me. So I don't have the decision fatigue in the same ways that I typically would. So I think there are a lot of life hacks that we can use it for, and finding the ways that that works for you. How is that not helpful?
Right. And I'll also say this, like, I know we have a lot of therapists that listen to the pod, which I'm always grateful for. Shout out to our mental health colleagues. Pew, 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 pew. But there was something about that too. I'm like, there's some sort of like modeling here that you're like, oh yeah, that's a good direction to sort of take this. So, and I wonder, like, in more, modern therapists, I wonder its depth of knowledge or breadth rather of like a bunch of different sort of therapists. But I don't know. There was something about that I'm like, oh, I haven't thought about like really Rogerian, like by the book ways to go about things, and reading some of those responses like, oh yeah. Like, I don't know. I was thinking both in the process of a client, but also through the lens. And I know people use it for that, meaning they use it to brush up on their own skills within their given profession.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And it's something that we could definitely use as clinicians anytime, especially that we typically would use case consultation, right? While you're still in school, a lot of times we will analyze cases together and get other people's takes and opinions, especially on certain cases if we're getting stuck. And that could potentially be a tool if you don't have access to case consultation or coworkers.
Yeah. It's so interesting because then as we're wrapping up here, I think, and they won't be named, but I know of people who have used it to sort of be like, how do I respond to this person's thing on this dating app? And there's like, that's when I go like, dang, is no one going to have an original interaction anymore? It's always going to be like interfaced of like, that was handed from Chat GPT or AI. And again, I'm owning there'll always be that little bit of elder millennial of like, get off my lawn with open AI that I'm just not, I don't know, maybe I'll grow from 40 and integrate it more. But I'm like, man, people are using it of like, how do I respond back to what this person said to me on Hinge? I'm like, damn, there's something about that. I'm like, to your point, I'm like, where is the authentic humanness?
Right. And I think over time, that is going to be the novelty.
Is what face-to-face chat with a human?
Face-to-face, authentic human interactions.
Yeah, we need to circle back to the good old days. I don't know if I feel that way entirely, but I do know that is just one of the realities of more and more technology is like we, all of us, every single person, it seems, is just more on their phone, more pulled away, and it's less sharpening the skill of communication and feeling good about using that, and just feeling less and less confident of like, oh, what would the old AI tell me to do in this situation? Which, again, as we've discussed, pros and cons.
Of course, to anything.
Oh, it's the nuance of life. And we love having the conversations every week here on Drop In. Dr. Jackie, thank you again for being here.
Thanks for having me.
You're like, you have no choice in the matter.
You're stuck with me now.
Thank you all so much. Rate, review, share. You could critique. Maybe we miss things. We always do. We're human here on this podcast. We can say with confidence we are human. Thank you, though, for participating. And again, we'll see you next week right here on Drop In.